current Governor Kathy Hochul, who is expected to seek re-election next year, signed the newly passed $254 billion state budget in front of school kids in the state's southern tier, celebrating a bell-to-bell cell phone ban in schools, as well as free breakfast and lunch for every student in New York. And North Country Assemblyman Billy Jones joins us now. Welcome. Nice to have you back.
Always great to be here, Tom.
It was a little more than a month late, but you and your fellow lawmakers passed a new state budget this past week, $254 billion, another new record for New York. Overall, is it a good budget, good for the North Country and Northern New York?
Well, in any budget, and I've discussed this for my last 9 budgets, Tom, there are things in there that I liked, that I could support and can support. And there are some things that I absolutely did not like. Funding for our organizations here in the North Country that help with agriculture and veterans and seniors and help with economic development. Happy to have that in there. Other things in there I didn't like, and I voted against that. One in particular were 3 more prison closures set in the budget. There were no prison closures in the governor's original budget, and then during the work stoppage, she put in for 5. There was that got narrowed down to 3, and I voted against that.
And we don't know what prisons yet. Docs and the governor's office haven't identified any prisons at this point.
That will be completely in Docs in the governor's office hands.
Of course, a concern to you. You have 6 prisons in your district here in the North Country.
Yes, and you know what? I was very disappointed when we're talking about prison reform here. I was disappointed there weren't some, at least any kind of corrections to the HALT law that a lot of our people are concerned in our area with creating safety in our correctional facilities for everyone, and as well as staffing demands that we have. So. Really disappointed in the public protection part of the budget.
It does include a record $37 billion in education funding. That must please you.
Yes, we're always pushing for more resources for our schools, especially in the North Country and the districts that I represent, to make sure they have the tools to educate our children.
Given that, are lawmakers now going to have to sit down and consider changes, many say are long overdue, to the foundation aid formula?
Yeah, there were a few changes made in the budget to the foundation aid formula, the poverty index. But whenever you make a change, you kind of affect other areas in that. So we really need a holistic approach to make sure that any of the changes that are made to the foundation aid formula don't hurt our smaller rural districts, many that I have in the North Country. So it needs to be an overall comprehensive plan to make sure that they continue to get the funding that they need.
The budget includes $114 million more for SUNY, including about $3 million for SUNY Plattsburgh, Canton, and Potsdam?
Yes, we have seen the great work that our colleges are doing in the North Country, and want to continue it. A lot of the money that we want to see geared toward is for workforce development, career pathways, and I will continue to push on that. Also, we have $90 million in there for workforce development, and always hoping that our schools and our organizations in the North Country can get a piece of that as well, to train our workers to make sure that they have a career pathway that suits them.
Speaking of schools, the governor held a few events this past week to celebrate the inclusion of a statewide ban on cell phones in schools. The entire school day from bell to bell that will begin in September. You agreed with the governor on this, didn't you?
Yes, I did. From my own personal and family experience on this, and talking to educators and people in the schools, there was some flexibility there with for school districts to make a plan. But we've all seen the distractions that these devices impose upon our students. I know school districts that have imposed this already, bell to bell. They've already seen the results of this, having the kids pay more attention in the classroom, better results, socializing more. So yes, I was in favor of that.
The budget also includes $340 million for free school breakfast and lunch for every student in every school in New York.
Yes, that's the goal.
What are some of the other highlights and funding that you were pleased to see?
One in particular that I think we should really concentrate is the forgiveness of the debt on the UI, the unemployment insurance. This is going to be a tremendous help to our businesses. During COVID, we saw a rate increase to those businesses, our small businesses, our businesses in the North Country. They were tacked on a couple of extra bills to pay for this debt. And myself, I believe you have been there at these press conferences. We've been pushing to eliminate that debt, to get rid of that extra billing, that extra cost, mandated cost to our businesses. So this will be a big relief to them.
Is there more CHIPS funding and more money for infrastructure, for water and sewer lines that so many communities need to upgrade?
I was pushing hard for that, for a mechanism for our localities and our local water districts to help upgrade their lines. We weren't able to get a separated fund for that, but we do have EPF money and other monies that we are continuing to push to put forward on that. CHIPS increased $100 million over the next 2 years. Always like to see that. Our local roads, our local county governments, local highways, highway departments, they really need that funding to keep up on our roads.
The governor did get a tax cut for the middle class and her inflation refunds for millions of New Yorkers going out this fall. She was out touting that again this week, $200 for individuals, $400 for families.
Anytime we can help our middle class out, certainly in favor of that. A couple of us would have liked to have seen a bigger cut in that, but naturally, we want to see it. The biggest complaint we get from our residents is affordability. Affordability here in New York and in the country, quite frankly. And with everything we're seeing, we're not seeing prices come down. So any way that we can help out through a tax cut, through any mechanism, our families really need it, and we hear that every day. And we should continue to make New York more affordable for people.
Well, the governor says this budget does just that. She's been talking about that for several months now, about how with the middle class tax cut, how the inflation refunds, how the expansion of the child tax credit up to $1,000 now per child. Altogether, with this free school lunch program, she's saying that that'll save the average family about $5,000.
Yes, and you can do the figures on that. And sure, and I did not mention the tax credit for children. Another plus to help our families out. But the problem that we continue to see here in New York is that when we do these good things, we also do stuff, mandated legislation on businesses and consumers that, basically they eliminate the good things that we have done. So we have to be very leery of that and continue. I, as a legislator, continue to watch that to make sure we don't have legislation that goes through that counteracts the good stuff that's going on. And, that's a big concern. A lot of these energy mandates that have been put on in the past couple of years, that's a real concern to our businesses and our families. And, we need to be cognizant of, we can't just throw money at a problem and then create more problems over here. We need to make sure that we're doing that in a way that doesn't hurt our families when we're trying to help them.
What about funding for seniors, for in-home care, for community-based programs and nursing homes? I know those have always been priorities for you. Did the funding come through for those programs this year?
A lot of it's dependent on Medicaid dollars, Tom, and that's a major concern to myself. Caring for our seniors, making sure that they have the in-home care that they can get, as well as in our nursing homes and assisted living facilities, not the increase that we wanted to see for sure.
You're worried there could be deep cuts by the federal government in Medicaid funding?
We have to be very careful about that, and to see or to hear about some of these cuts that could possibly be coming down the road, it's going to affect everyone. And I think we should all be cognizant of that.
Are you expecting lawmakers, you and your fellow lawmakers, maybe called back to Albany at some point to deal with those cuts? And you've been saying for a number of weeks now that people need to be realistic about this, that Albany is not going to be able to fill all of the gaps if there are deep cuts in Medicaid.
Absolutely. And I mean, when you're talking about $90 billion of pass-through money from federal to the state, that's an enormous amount of money. And I try to be clear with everyone on this. I think the cuts will be more severe in some areas, but it's going to be maybe an across-the-board cut. So everyone will be affected by this. And unfortunately, the state of New York and the state of New York taxpayers cannot make up for all those cuts. No.
Anything in the budget to help deal with the housing crisis?
Well, I've been talking about housing for many years with you. There was funding in the budget for affordable housing, and there were other programs that were for homeowners and such. But as I've always said, we have a very unique, not a very unique, but a lot of times when we're talking about housing, we're talking about housing in New York or some of the bigger cities, and affordable housing. I like to talk about housing affordability. We have a lot of people that are trying, first-time homeowners or maybe even second-time homeowners, or home buyers, I should say, that are trying to get that American dream to build a home or to buy a home. And we need more programs suited for that. In the Adirondacks and in the North Country, we know where we live, there are certain programs that we need to put in place to help them out. And to help them out with their property taxes, quite frankly, because in a lot of our areas, our property taxes are just, unattainable.
Assemblyman Billy Jones, thank you very much for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.